Hello, folks. Welcome to the Genuinely Interested podcast. I'm your host, Roy Bensby. This podcast is an opportunity for me to speak with some of the most interesting people I know, either with amazing talents or achievements or unbelievable life stories or just invaluable insights into areas which they have dedicated their lives to studying. I sit down with these amazing individuals from across the planet and I try to ask them questions that will hopefully help you, the listener, extract something valuable or learn something new or just hopefully get inspired by. You can find all the episodes for the podcast on all the major podcasting platforms such as iTunes, Spotify, Google, Overcast, iHeartRadio, literally all of them. It's there. If you love the show, if it adds value to your life in any way, shape, or form, please leave reviews on iTunes. It really helps grow the podcast. It puts it up there so more people can see it. You can also find all the episodes and everything else, all the information that's updated regularly on the website, which is roybensv.com, ROYBENTZVI.com, and you can sign up for updates as well. Also been updating the YouTube channel, so I've been uploading old episodes pretty much on a daily basis, so you can find it there. And in the future, I hope to make video podcasting as well. If that's something you guys want to check out and are interested in, please shoot me email. I'd love to hear from you. And also make sure to check out the social media platforms, Instagram and Twitter. I post there daily. And lastly, if you guys want to support and help grow the podcast, please go to Buy Me a Coffee or Anchor or Patreon. It is an endeavor to grow this podcast and make it what it should be. And it takes a village. So I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. I see that there are literally listeners from all over the world in each and every country. So thank you to everyone, and on to the show. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I appreciate it. This week on the show, we have Kaddu Sebunya. Kaddu is the CEO of African Wildlife Foundation, formerly the president. And he is a very interesting guy with many insights and a whole lot of knowledge on conservation, especially in Africa. He's been doing this for a very long time. He was born in Uganda, did most of his higher education in Europe and in the US, and then came back to Africa to help with some of these problems. So he's been in conservation for a very, very long time, I think around 20 years or so. So he really knows what he's talking about. And what I love more than anything is that it's not a black or white, right or left. It's not binary in the sense that the answers that he gives, he's not in one group or another group. He's just much more of a pragmatic thinker. He's a problem solver, and how do we move forward type of thinking, which I really appreciated. So a lot of fun, a lot of insights. He really advocates for solving problems, keeping things in-house, so to speak. So not relying on foreign powers, on foreign money, on foreign influence from China or the Europe or the US. He wants to keep things in Africa. He wants the youth to understand the importance of animals and of the wild habitats. He wants them to understand why conservation is crucial to the growth of Africa and why conservation and economic prosperity are not divorced from one another, not two foreign subjects, but actually can work together in a very harmonious way. So, like I said, he's been on the boots on the ground doing grassroots for a very long time. He's got a lot of insights, and he was kind enough to sit down and have a chat about it. He was an open book, had a lot of useful information, and I hope you guys enjoy the episode as much as I did. So let's jump right into it. And without further ado, here is Kaddu Sebunya. Enjoy the episode, everyone.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
How you doing?
Good, I agree.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Kaddu. I really wanted to talk to you. This is a topic that is dear to my heart, and I'm glad you could come on and have this conversation.
No, thanks for reaching out. Great.
Where are you? Where are you located now?
No, I'm in Nairobi, Kenya.
Nairobi.
This is our headquarters. Yeah.
Okay. And so that's how long has it been? Because you're not originally from Nairobi, right?
No. I'm from Uganda,
Okay.
but I've been here in Nairobi for 5 years.
Okay. How is there? How different is it
Yeah,
as
no,
far as just the culturally, socially, just the country?
yeah, no, it's very, very different. I mean, Uganda is just in the west, so we share a border with Kenya, but it can't be so much different. I mean, it is the languages are different to start with. Uganda has about 30 plus languages, but
Wow.
few of those are spoken in Kenya. It's only on the border with Kenya that there is that's how far the culturally we are so different.
Yeah.
Of course, Swahili helps. That is a regional language that all countries speak. Uganda is a little bit humid, more than here in Nairobi. So Uganda average temperature in Uganda is you know it's about it gets cold, and in Uganda cold is about 22 Celsius or 20. That's very cold.
Yeah.
And that's the mornings. Then
Okay.
it gets hot at midday, and that is when it's about 30 or less.
Wow. Okay.
Here in Kenya, it gets to 4% Celsius. So it
Wow.
gets cold. As a Ugandan, it's really cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's very, very different. And it's more urban too compared to Uganda. Kenya is more urban. Middle class is bigger than Uganda. So yeah, but like Africa there's more commonality than the differences.
Yeah, because I think people sometimes don't understand how massive Africa is. Because sometimes when you look on a map, it doesn't give you the full picture. But I think it's something like you can put, I believe, the USA, China, in Europe, and you can fit all those into Africa,
Plus Russia.
maybe even more.
Yeah,
No, 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 no.
yeah.
Plus Russia?
I mean, this is massive. And a lot of people, in my work, when I go and talk about with people in North America, especially, and tell them that some of the national parks we manage are larger than Rhode Island.
Yeah.
As other
Rhode Island, tiny.
Wow. No, I mean, it's tiny, but how many policemen or firemen or lawyers or that do they have to manage the community
Yeah.
of Rhode Island? And you compare to a national park here, you know, no, some of them compete with the New Hampshire
Hmm.
in size. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's crazy. I mean, I lived in Africa for about 6 years.
Where?
So when I was a child, I lived in South Africa for 4 years, and then I lived in Ghana for another 2 years. And we traveled. I went to Cote d'Ivoire. I've been to a couple of other
Good.
Swaziland at the time.
Wow. Yeah.
What else? Yeah, so it's beautiful. I wish more people would go. And I think now, especially, and this is something I wanted to talk to you in a minute, but we can talk about COVID and tourism. But maybe before that, I want to just give a little bit background about yourself. So you're the president of the African Wildlife Foundation. And maybe just give us a bit of background. How long have you been a part of the organization? What does the AWF do?
Yeah, no, I'm the CEO and president of the African Wildlife Foundation. Just started to, I just this job I started in 2019. Before that, I was the president
Hmm.
for 2 or 3 years. Then I became the CEO. But before that, I'd worked for AWF for 10 years in different
Oh, wow.
capacities. So I've been with this organization for about 15 years now. In different capacities, from as a country manager, as a program design officer, as somebody who in Washington for 4 years, responsible for engaging U.S. government and that included Congress, the Department, the White House on issues about Africa conservation, and then back here at the headquarters. So it's pretty exciting period now. I mean, this is the largest African conservation organization, solely focused on Africa. And the history is next year we are celebrating 6 years of work on the continent. It's exciting to lead. We've just also written our new vision, which is the next 10 years. It's exciting to lead an institution like this into the next 10 years when Africa really is, it's a period when Africa is going to make decisions that will determine the Africa we will have and the Africa will have to the world. But other than that, I grew up in Uganda and my background is in social. I'm not an ecologist, as most people think, because I'm leading a conservation organization. But my background is social administration, political science, first degree from Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda. But also, I went through a couple of colleges. Y College, that's Imperial College in London, with a Masters of Natural Resource Management and Policy, and then a degree in French language, a diploma, in French language in Strasbourg. So I lived in France for a couple of months, about 9 months, and then Tufts University in Boston, where I did a master's in law and diplomacy, and I was looking at the international issues and laws and policies that the global institutions and national states need to negotiate and in managing the global natural resources for the world, as opposed to state laws and policies and the diplomacy that is engaged in that. But also I've worked in other sectors. I've worked for Oxfam, which is really related to emergency responses to war situations, famine, and other situations. I did that in Southern Sudan, in Uganda, in Rwanda after genocide. I've worked for Peace Corps, which is a U.S. Agency, as a country coordinator for in Africa, bringing in young Americans, a program that I think is the best thing out of the U.S. Getting young Americans exposed to different cultures. And I worked with other different conservation organizations from Europe and US as well. So it's a mix of a lot of other.
Yeah, I mean, you've been all over. It seems like you've been everywhere.
Well, I haven't been to Antarctica, so
there's still time.
Yeah.
Are you seeing more Africans that are maybe studying abroad? Because I think, and then this is true for most immigrants, right? They go to the US or to Europe and they study there, and then maybe they find a wife or a husband and they tend to stay there. But are you maybe seeing more people coming back to Africa now?
Yeah, it's a recent thing. And there are so many drivers for that. Opportunities is one, obviously. But Africa is just the last, even in my lifetime, that Africa has started settling down. In the 80s, believe it or not, we only had, I think, less than 5 countries that held elections.
Wow.
So this is a recent phenomenon.
It's very new country. It's very new everything.
Very new processes. So stability or instability forced a lot of Africans who have gone out studying to stay abroad besides the opportunities, but they wouldn't come back here and do what they're supposed to do. Now, it's a huge, huge opportunity for an African who is on the continent and abroad. I mean, this is just a pre-COVID. The best growing economies were found here on the continent. And there's so many exciting things happening on the continent. And I always tell the young generation, I'm 54, so I tend to think that I'm old or middle generation, but I tell the young generation that they are the luckiest Africans that have ever existed on this planet. They are, Africa is more settled. It's more. They are more educated than any other African generation. They are more exposed. They're more traveled than any other continent, and they live longer.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what drew you to conservation initially?
Yeah, conservation, I just stumbled on it by accident. Like I said, my background is my first degree is in sociology and political science. So my interest was really in anthropology, rural economy and development. And I was looking forward to working with either UN or government in dealing with the rural development. That was my interest, and that's why I went to France in Strasbourg to do French, because my brothers told me, look, if you want to do this and you want a good job, you need to speak French. So I said, okay. Yeah. I went and did for diploma in France to do that. But when I was there, Strasbourg is the center of Europe, and I was staying with a family friend, my dad's friend, who was a council member for the European Union. He was a European Union civil servant. So I was introduced to the European Union systems, but it was too early at that time. That was the time of Margaret Thatcher. You can tell my age from that. She was the Prime Minister in the UK. Okay. And the huge discussion when I arrived in Strasbourg was about the environmental policies. European Union, especially driven by the Germans, they were negotiating in Strasbourg. And they are saying that they were forcing UK to sign on as a member of the Economic Union. And Margaret Thatcher was saying over her dead body, she's not going to sign, she was going to pull UK out. And it became a huge thing. But also that was the time when Germany was not united yet. So Eastern Europe, as we knew it at that time, was so underdeveloped that there was a lot of acid rain.
Oh, wow.
In Europe because of the poor industries in Eastern Europe, polluting and creating acid rain, which was destroying forests in Western Europe.
Yeah.
And that was another huge discussion in Brussels at that time. Then the rivers, especially Danube River, was being polluted by industries in Eastern Europe, and the river came through Western Europe. And so that was another. So I started asking, what is this animal? What is environment? Why are people talking? What's pollution?
Yeah.
Why are people so angry about this? So I became inquisitive, but I started reading about it. And I was like, you know what? This is interesting because I haven't heard about this in Africa. Mm-hmm. And this is going to be so important to Africa. So that was the introduction. So as I read more, I got more interested. And that led me to a college in the UK. At that, it was called Y College. It was an old agricultural college. Okay. But it was the first European college at that time to offer environmental degrees for Europeans.
Wow.
So I applied, I got it. My class, we were two Africans, and three or one people from each country from Europe, Western Europe, a few Americans, and where the earlier people at that time looking at really environment as a class and masters and looking at how it's agriculture, urban planning policies, development policies. It was you do about 16 courses in urban planning, agriculture, development, economics, and how environment factors into that. So that was the introduction to read environment. And I got it, and I started looking around for opportunities. For me, they never came because while I was in the UK, I wanted to come back to Africa to apply a lot of what I did, and I went back to Uganda, and I couldn't find a job because there was no Ministry of Environment. There was that.
What years was this?
That was the 98, I think.
98. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 89. Sorry, that was around 89. Yes.
So you're ahead of your time. Like there was the green movement, the environmental movement that kind of started in the U.S. with Greenpeace and Sea Shepherd later on. That I think that was kind of like the 60s and 70s, but it was a niche thing. It wasn't really mainstream back then.
No, well, I can say even today, still we haven't really mainstreamed it. So much elitist still in so many ways. But the story here is that I come back to Uganda. I couldn't find a job. I volunteered with a British NGO which was doing water and sanitation in rural areas in Uganda. Yeah. And they said, as a volunteer, go and do sanitation in eastern Uganda near one of the Uganda national parks, which was Mount Elgon. That's on the border with Kenya. And that was my first interaction with really, because I was born and raised in Uganda, in Kampala. I've never really lived in deep rural Africa. So I go to this eastern town, go to near this park, and as I started seeing what's going on with agriculture, forestry, and I started getting interested in natural management applications at the field. But I was in the wrong NGO.
Yeah.
I did that for 3 months. Then this NGO sent me, I was so fortunate. They sent me, now they gave me a permanent job after 3 months. They sent me to start their new program in Western Uganda, in the middle of a national park, trying to help a fishing village to get good water.
Wow.
So I was in this middle of this fishing village, middle of a national park, on a lake in this is the second largest park in Uganda, Queen Elizabeth National Park. And I was among these fishing folks. And I was the only person excited about wildlife I saw. And I was like, what's going on around? So, I had my Nikon camera, you put in a film and you start taking photos. You're gonna be careful because you have only 30 shots in a film. Yeah. So it's not like now that you delete and then have more space. No, memory. Now, so I was taking photos and everybody thought I was crazy because they only see white people do that. Mm-hmm. As a Ugandan, black Ugandan, they're saying, what is this smoking? Getting excited about photos and stuff. But that period in that village, I spent 2 years in this village. I realized that if we really don't connect as Africans to this kind of environment, we are not going to be able to conserve and protect wildlife. If I'm the only one here who even is excited about wildlife. Yeah. Then I started looking at what's going on with the rest of Ugandans. And I realized that actually fewer Ugandans cared really about wildlife. Then I said, we need to do something as a country. I started looking around what NGO, what government is doing. So I ended up with, getting a job in conservation NGOs, and that's where, the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, offered me a job, and I started now dealing with this kind of issues. Even then, from there, I worked for Peace Corps, which was again, we are placing Peace Corps volunteers in national parks as wardens, tourism. So that is the long story of really how I got into environment. Then I started reading more, doing more diplomas, doing, then the Tufts University, and here I am.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, if in Africa, and again, like this is, I know Africa is massive, different countries, different area within countries, rural versus city, etc. But just as a general statement, if there's economic strife, if people are, making $1 a day or even less, and they can't feed their family, they don't really care about animals, right? It's like, I just want to feed my family. I just want to have a job. I just want to educate my children. And like, I don't really care about an elephant or a gorilla or a zebra. But can animal and environmental conservation go hand in hand with economic prosperity and growth?
That's the question we are trying to answer here at the African Wildlife Foundation. We strongly believe that it's a forced choice to think that development and conservation cannot go together.
Yeah.
We think that they reinforce each other. We think that Africa will not achieve its development goals if we don't pay attention to conservation. But also we believe at the same time, we are not going to be successful in conservation if Africa does not develop.
Yeah.
So we need to find a midpoint of where the intersection between those two things. The models we are looking at, just you look at climate change, the models we are looking at, Africa is going to be impacted more than any other continent in the world. But that's not even, that is far from reality of many people who earn $1 a day or less.
Yeah.
But the reality of the matter is that if you are in agriculture, which is 70% of Africans are, you should know where water comes from. It's primary education.
Mm-hmm.
Water comes from forests.
Yeah.
So the ecological services that conservation provides for the survival of human life on this continent or elsewhere are things we need to discuss with many of the human species. That has not been the case, and that is the challenge for conservation on the continent. The stories, the awareness, and education has been about animals. We cannot continue carrying out conservation as an end in itself, because the science is not telling us that. Ecological systems, including wildlife, provide several services for our survival as a human species, especially on this continent, that we need to raise that awareness and that connection to Africans that have been, for many, many years, been told that conservation is about animals, that we needed to protect animals away from Africans.
Yeah.
That's the history of creation of national parks in Africa. That animals can only survive by training more rangers and giving them guns and putting them in military uniforms to shoot any poacher who comes by and alienate conservation of wildlife from people. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of the undercurrent about the approaches we have used as conservationists, including myself, on the continent, that have not been helpful, and statistics don't support the approaches we've been used. Because you would ask yourself, if you look at the financing of conservation on this continent, the issue is not we don't have money. But then you ask yourself, why is it that continuously despite the effort of NGOs and governments, Africa continues every year to lose 35 plus thousand elephants every year. How come that every year new threatened species come on the list? Giraffes.
Almost every animal, almost any wildlife is in some variation of extinct or
where are the
endangered.
results of our effort on the continent? We have looked at that as the largest African organization on the continent. We think that that work needs to continue, the old work we've been doing on the continent. But the hugest gap is supporting Africans to take on the responsibility of conservation on the continent and to encourage Africans to take on their responsibility, our responsibility. Nobody, no non-African is going to do that sustainably on the continent. It's our work, it's our duty as Africans to do this. It's not anybody's problem that this is happening, because maybe without the international community doing what they're doing with the continent, maybe we would have lost everything. I don't know. So it's not a blame game, but it's a reality that we need to check ourselves and not continue doing the same things and expect different results. But I want to very quickly respond to something you said about the connection between economic aspirations and people's affiliations and connection to wildlife. It's not true that actually Africans don't care about wildlife. That's false. Actually, I belong to a black and white Columbus monkey clan. That is my name. That's my heritage.
Yeah.
That is who I am. I can do anything to protect a black and white monkey. That is my responsibility by birth. I'm not alone. All Africans, by name, by clan, by totem, by village, have a connection to wildlife. Wildlife are our names. They define where we come from. They define who we are as Africans. And increasingly, they are the brand for our continent. Whether you are from Egypt or you are from Uganda like me.
Yeah.
Africa brand is wildlife and wildlands. So they define who we are as an African. So the connection is real. And Africans do. But what has happened over time is the history. You know, parks were created and people were told, you really have not, from now onwards, you are trespassing if you come to this area. From now onwards, if you've been a hunter, you are a poacher. From now onwards, you have to pay to enter your land.
Yeah.
And by the way, we are doing this for tourism.
Well,
and you are not a tourist. It's only foreigners who are tourists.
Yeah.
That went on and on and on and on. And we ended where we are now, Africans thinking that, you know what, governments and foreigners come and do protection of animals, wildlife, for foreign tourists, you know, and not for us.
Yeah.
But as we move forward, the connection, the soils, wildlife and wildlands maintain the agricultural soils. It's a food security issue. They clean our air. You know, rain, they provide water.
Grow trees.
Yeah, they create, they're the air conditioners.
Yeah.
But also they provide energy. 80% of our energy is coming from there. Whether you are provided by hydro power generation, which is majority of Africa energy sources in terms of industry, or you use firewood. domestically. It's natural resources that are providing that. But how many Africans really have been told that conservation is about that? No, they've been told again and again that conservation is a tree hugger. We just want wildlife. By the way, how many times I've been told that I represent a foreign agenda?
Well, it's hard for people, and this is true, I think, everywhere, to see if it's 2 or 3 or 4 levels removed as far as economic prosperity, right? Like if you say, oh, it's good to have trees in the Amazon because A, B, C, D, and then the 4th level will bring some sort of economic prosperity 20 years from now, that's hard to see. But if you say tourism, which brings in X money each year directly to people's pockets, that's a much more tangible thing. And that's something I actually wanted to ask. I've spoken to a few people in the last year or so, a lot of heads of nonprofits in Africa and in the US as well, and in Asia also. And everyone's pretty much suffering across the board. And it's for different reasons, but I wanted to ask you how you and your team are dealing with it. And is the lack of tourism a big hit? Like a big financial hit?
For AWF, not really in terms of financial. It's real in terms of our work.
Yeah.
It's real in terms of the impact of our investments. It's real in terms of the results we are looking forward to from the work we do. We are a unique organization. Like I said, we are an African organization. We work through governments. Our work is owned by governments. So it's very difficult for me to answer that question without looking at the governments and people's aspirations as well, because our work is owned by either government National Park Service or community land or landowners who are managing wildlife on that land, or private landowners who is gaining as using wildlife as a business on their land. They've been impacted as well because we assumed wrongly by design for a long time that actually the tourism industry is large and is enough to provide a good model and examples of why conservation is important. We knew that the importance of conservation in terms of the ecological services and the ecosystem services that are provided for air, soil, water. We knew all that, but we never promoted those things. We promoted so much the link between tourism and livelihoods. Now COVID comes and they shut down the industry overnight. The conversations I had at that time, because in the next 3 weeks after the shutdown, I hosted a webinar with 34 senior executives who are running national parks across the continent. I wanted to hear where the pain points.
Yeah. And
majority of them told me, we have 2 weeks to go with our financial reserves.
Wow.
We have 3 months. Those are the ones we are doing better than others, because almost 70% of their revenues came from tourism industry. That meant that there was less boots on the ground. That if there are no less boots on the ground in terms of patrols, it opens opportunities for the bad guys, poachers, to come in. The guides who know the park very well can easily be recruited by the other guys because of the point you made. They have to make choices. Either they put breakfast on the table, but their jobs are gone because the industry shut down. So what we did as an organization, that's why we responded with what we called COVID emergency programs, providing from fuel to many of the national parks where we work, paying allowances to park officials and rangers, providing food ratios so that the patrollers can go and spend a week out there in the bush. Communities who have been gaining from wildlife as a wildlife economy. We designed programs that we called cash programs that created alternative employment away from tourists. We engineered things. In Ethiopia, we hired people to come and pick trash from national parks.
Wow.
In Uganda, we brought in communities to maintain the tourism infrastructure. Instead of using machines, we brought in intensive labor to maintain the park infrastructure so that we can, this cash for programs, we can really, people can maintain their lives without trying to find other alternatives, which would mean putting pressure to natural resources, because we saw that people turned into selling charcoal. That meant cutting more trees, produce charcoal for energy. People started doing overfishing, because now a lot of people wait for fishing. People expanded their agricultural land, and then human-wildlife conflict increased. Poaching spiked because people needed protein, especially for small mammals. So we saw that in different places. So there was that impact. But because, luckily for us as an organization, because of who we are, we continued our work. Because we have a program like in Ethiopia, our staff are Ethiopians. Even in the districts, many of them are from those districts. So we never had to evacuate anyone from our work. And as governments closed, a lot of these folks could not come back to urban areas. So they stayed and we continued working.
What, because you mentioned illegal poaching, and what would you say is the biggest threat to wildlife? Is it poaching, habitat encroachment, urbanization? What would probably be number one?
Number one is habitat loss.
Okay.
Yeah. The competition for land or space between wildlife and people's needs is real. And that's why our group, we are in the middle of those negotiations. Conservation now in Africa is about negotiating space, future space for wildlife and people. Mm-hmm. My country, Uganda, when I was born, it was less than 20 million.
Wow.
Now it's about 46 million. The population has doubled in my lifetime. So, and it's the youngest country, one of the youngest countries in the world. So we expect that population to double again in my lifetime.
Well, Africa is very young. Africa, the median age in Africa, I think it's 20. It's insane.
Yeah, 70% are below 30.
Wow.
Fine. So it's a young continent. But that's a huge opportunity for us too.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing necessarily.
No, it's good.
An opportunity. It's an opportunity for Africa as we engineer and make decisions of the Africa we want. We just have to make sure, and that's the work we've taken on, make sure that wildlife and wild lands are defined within the aspirations of this young continent. That wildlife and wildlands play a role in people's aspirations. In reality, you talked about the $1 and the economic. You know how I defined it? Mm-hmm. We need conservation today needs to demonstrate that a leopard or a rhino has more value than a chicken.
Yeah. Because
people living near a national park, they value a chicken and a goat and a pig more than a rhino, an elephant, and a leopard. Simply because you can take your child to school when you have 3 or 4 chickens. Mm-hmm. You can marry or get married because someone has a goat. You can pay your medical bills because you have a pig. Yeah. You cannot do any of those right now because you are living next to a rhino.
Yeah.
So how we re-engineer the responsibilities, the ownership, the leadership of conservation of the continent is going to generate the answers. We need not only green economies for the continent, but wildlife economies, so that wildlife and wildlands are part of national economies and part of household incomes. And we've been very successful in many of our projects at the site level. The challenge now we have, how do you scale that up? And very quickly. Mm-hmm. Because that young population we talked about, they are hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they want jobs, they want incomes, and they want a good life.
Well, that's what I'm assuming. I'm assuming, if you go to developing nations in Asia and in Africa and Latin America, most people don't want to work physical labor, right? They want better jobs. They want to be in tech. They want to be in some sort of a service industry, whatever it is. Most people do not want to be, let's say, farmers like their parents, or they're working out with animals or anything that's laborious, right? How do you convince a younger generation that is more concentrated on tech, on on apps, on that type of world?
It's
How do you
really
convince them about
Yeah. It's mindset. And this is what I tell African leaders every time I get an opportunity to meet them. We need to stop this idea that development means chasing the Western world. Mm-hmm. Everything you've said is a mindset of Africans or Asians or Latin Americans or Central Americans that we think that a good job has been defined by a New Yorker.
Yeah.
And not somebody in Nairobi. It's already defined. And in our mind, that's what it means. It's changing though. The young generation you've defined, they're not my generation. I know young people here in Kenya who are going into farming. They're looking for financing to do that. My generation, nobody will ever think about going farming. That's for rural people.
Yeah.
The new generation are looking more for opportunities to do farming, do things that we never thought about, because they are more exposed, they are more educated. And by the way, they are more Pan-African than my generation. So they have traveled more across countries in Africa than my generation has ever. We've always traveled in Europe and North America. These young people are going in different African countries and learning more and being exposed more. My hope and optimism is in this young group that is more African, that's more on land. However, here is the challenge. They are not the leaders. The leaders are from my generation.
Yeah.
And therefore, you ask the biggest challenge, apart from habitat, the biggest challenge Africa has is that decisions by generation of leaders are making around our economic prosperity. Unfortunately, right now, most of them are chasing Western Europe. Yeah. It's about building highways. It's about building skyscrapers. It's about building industries. It's very, very old economic development terms that Africa needs to industrialize. For what? Because we cannot produce things cheaper than Asia.
No.
So why are we industrializing? But that's the mindset of a generation. So as that, the decisions Africa is making about urbanization, about transport, future transport, the way Africans will transport ourselves, the decisions we are making now about that, the decisions we are making on choices of energy Africa will have, the decisions we are making on education of future Africans, the decisions today we are making about mobility of Africans is going to determine space and the results will have what is going to be left for wildlife and wildlife. It's not going to be determined by the efforts we are putting in conservation.
Yeah.
Much as that is necessary. But we can't do one and not the other. So that's why our programs are split. We are continuing with the conservation, but as a CEO, I don't spend a lot of time with the ministers of environment. I spend more time with the Minister of Finance, with the Minister of Rural Development, with the presidency, because that's where the decisions are being made that are going to determine what Africa will look like in the next 5 years. And that we don't have enough time.
Well, the interesting part about Africa right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost like this miniature geopolitical war that's happening, where for the longest time it's been, I'm assuming, Europe and America that's been investing and working on development and on conservation as well. Although I don't know how well or how much investment you've gotten from Trump in the last 4 years. That's a different story. I don't know if it's good or bad. But it seems like China has also kind of stepped up, and they've started to pour billions of dollars into Africa and into infrastructure, roads. But China is also responsible. I don't know again what percentage, but it's I'm assuming a pretty good percentage of the illegal poaching, all the bad stuff that is happening to animals. Some of it's accredited to China. So it's kind of like it's tossed up between, is it net positive, net negative to get that type of influence? What's your opinion?
A couple of things here. Your question is in 4 different things.
Okay.
Require 4 different responses.
Yeah.
1, Africa has reset. So what I would advise the Biden administration or the European Union, they need to meet Africa where Africa is. Mm-hmm. It's no longer the Africa of even 10 years ago or 20 years ago. This is Africa. It's young. It's confident. It knows what it wants. And therefore, anyone who wants to deal now with Africa in a positive way needs to engage, needs to listen, needs to meet Africa where it is. And especially if you care about conservation, it's much more even important you do that than actually folks. It's easier for the folks who are bringing in economic development, and because everybody wants that. So it's really, we see, it's actually, it's the continent that is led by most educated people. But a lot of people don't know that.
Really?
Yeah. You look at your cabinet in the US, how many have PhDs and masters? Or even in the Senate. Look at the Senate, look at the Congress, and look at African parliaments. All these folks have degrees from Harvard and Oxford and everywhere else. You find more educated leaders on this continent than any other continent. And that's a fact. So there is a lot of change in Africa, but there's a lot of corruption. There are a lot of issues we need to deal with as Africans. But so anyone who is genuinely want to be a partner to Africa, European Union, UK as out of Europe, needs to have a different conversation and not a big brother conversation with Africa. Maybe it's going to be an uncle relationship, because we have a longer history with the UK, obviously, and therefore we can regard the UK as our uncle or auntie for that matter, but definitely not our big brother anymore.
Yeah.
So it's as you said. Now, my point on China is interesting. China is the biggest development partner currently on the continent. So China's behaviors around Africa's economic aspirations is very, very, very important. But it's not about China. It's about Africans. It's about Africa. We shouldn't expect China to come and help Africa. That's not going to happen.
No. But nothing's for free.
No.
China is the
There's nothing
reason
for
China
free.
is
So
pouring these
was-
billions.
Yeah, so was North America, so is Europe.
Correct.
Africa just needs to engage our development partners
Yeah.
and negotiate some things that are good for Africa. We shouldn't expect China to come and be good to us, or Europe for that matter, or Biden's administration for that matter. But they are expecting a partner here to engage and negotiate. And if they don't find a good partner in Africa, they are going to take advantage of a weak partner.
Yeah.
Sometimes deliberately, sometimes actually, perhaps many times, it's not deliberate, but it's just that they find a weak partner who cannot define exactly the Africa we want.
Yeah.
So now I want to make a point before you ask your next question, just to educate your audience. By the way, Europe and North America is one of the biggest consumers, of ivory.
Yeah.
So
Second to China.
It's a myth that actually somehow China is the worst of consumer of Africa's wildlife. No, the biggest market of bushmeat out of Africa is in Brussels.
Really?
Is in Belgium of bushmeat out of the continent.
Okay.
Giraffe is mostly North America. Ivory, China is a newcomer to this. Obviously, China has
Chinese medicine. They use it.
Exactly. China is surpassing now Europe and North America. It's a recent development. It doesn't mean that North America and Europe have stopped.
Yeah.
If you want to be genuine about this, why can't Europe ban trade in ivory? Or US for that matter? No, it's a hot button. I know that, and I've been involved in some ways. A few states in the US have banned.
There have bans, right? There's some. I know some places have bans.
State level. Yeah, California has state level. But also there's a qualification of allowing old ivory to be traded. And the big guys take advantage of that and trade new ivory out of Africa. I've been working with New Zealand. It's still difficult for them to ban trade in ivory. They still auction ivory on the market in New Zealand. So China is not a bad guy. See, I'm not defending China. We have a program that engages China. We work with China. Yeah. We are addressing international wildlife trade just quickly in three ways. We are stopping the killing with our programs on ground. We are stopping the trafficking, efforts to stop trafficking. We are now having in the 9 countries we are placing canine to sniff and patrol on most of the airports. Most of the dogs you find in the airports in Africa, so that many of those are our programs, or in national parks. So, and that addresses trafficking. We do prosecutorial work. We work with government to strengthen the laws to stop trafficking. We are working with rangers in collecting evidence and securing evidence so that we can prosecute these bad guys. And that's the programs that stop the trafficking. But also we work to stop the demand. Because until the demand stops, the killing will not stop. So long as there is a buyer, Africans don't buy this ivory. I've never seen a market in Africa buying ivory. It's all outside Africa.
That's the problem. Yeah.
It's international trade.
Yeah.
So the responsibility is Africa's responsibility. And that's why we're saying Africans, we need to step up. It's our responsibility. We can shut this down tomorrow if we care.
So I have 2 arguments that I hear a lot, and I would love to get your take on them. And this is one of these. The first one. This is something you touched on a little earlier. where there is a lot of charity and I think the U.S. is the biggest one. I think the U.S. by far gives the most charity outside of any country. But there's a lot of charity that goes, let's say, just for an example, secondhand clothes. A lot of secondhand clothes from America, from Europe, comes to Africa. There's a famous company, Tom's, when they make shoes that every pair you buy, the second they donate to Africa or Asia. And on the surface, that looks amazing. Wow, that's so good. You're doing charity work. You're giving to people who don't have. And it's an amazing thing, right? On the surface. But when you dig a little deeper, and again, this is the argument that I keep hearing, and I want to get your take on it, is you are hurting industry by providing these cheap goods to Africans. The locals cannot get into that industry and compete on a competitive level. Therefore, you're cutting industry in those countries. So what's your opinion on that?
It's really mixed. It's really mixed. Without some of that aid, there will be a lot of suffering on the continent because of you meet people where they are. Industries haven't grown to the level that they should be. The incentives to grow those industries, of course, you need to break the egg to make an omelette. So you need to stop that so that the industries can grow.
Yeah.
But without the growth of the industry, clothes and shoes need to come from somewhere else. So it's mixed. But in general terms, if aid worked, Africa will be the most organized, developed in so many ways than any other continent. It receives more aid than anyone else.
Yeah.
Anywhere else. How come, if it works, how come we are where we are? Yeah. So there is a problem.
Well, there could be misallocation of funds, stuff like that.
It's how it's done. It's how it's done. It's not aid is bad. It's how it's done.
Yeah.
Who asks for aid? Which aid is being asked? Who manages it? Who benefits?
Where does the money go?
Where does the money go?
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, I've seen programs where most of the money stays abroad.
Really?
Aid money. Yeah, I've seen such programs where actually a lot of the consultant firms, a lot of the overheads, a lot of the experts, a lot of the vehicle imports to run the projects and all that. You look at that, that's 70% of the budget.
Wow.
And actually 30 or 40% of the budget, even if it's 50% of the budget reaches the ground, still don't make a big difference. Yeah. So we've seen some of those things. Some of it is waste coming from not so much designed approaches and strategies. The intention is good, the delivery is completely wrong.
Yeah.
The solution is good, but to a bad problem.
Yeah.
Or to a wrong problem. So we've seen that those kind of mismatches around aid. But where it's intentional and it's focused and it's deliberate and it has an African perspective to it, which we have seen in so many other sectors outside the aid sector. I mean, you look at the financial sector on the continent, it's African-led.
Yeah.
I haven't met a financial CEO of any international bank on the continent. That is foreign. I've only met African CEOs running international banks on the continent. So we've seen this kind of, and they're making huge profits. Why? Because they have African CEOs, they have African, who know how business is done, who know where the problem is, who know what needs to be done and how it needs to be done and why it should be done. It's all that. It's nothing to do with saying foreigners are bad. No. That's not the point. The point is if I'm not an African, I need to look for an African I'm working for. Whether it's an institution, a community, or an individual. But if you come, especially what we see in conservation, there's a lot of emotions, You come, you want to save elephants, you talk to the National Park Service, they are bureaucratic, sometimes they are corrupt, sometimes they might not know what they're doing. Instead of addressing those issues, you bypass everything and go and conserve the elephants.
Yeah.
And then after a year, you go, everything collapses. And then it's, oh, no, nothing can work in Africa. But it's just you haven't faced the problem, the source of the problem why things are not working. You've bypassed because you think it's urgent. We need to deal with this quickly. We have the experts from North America or Europe who can do this in a year. Why are we bothered in building capacities, building institutions, raising awareness, negotiating with governments? While elephants are dying, so we're going to go in. So there are good reasons. It's not that they're bad people or bad guys. No. It's just that we just need to step back and say, look, how do we sustain this? How can it be sustainable?
Yeah.
Our efforts. And then, it's going to have, a little bit of African leadership and voice. And I don't know how many people, Africans, you've heard on one of these conservation channels, telling Africans why this is important. Until Africans hear from Africans why elephants are important, until Africans start hearing from their ministers or central bank governors telling them why forests are important, that is, we're going to lose everything.
Yeah. And I love your answers because we right now, especially in the US, and I'm sure it's exported elsewhere into the world, we're living in such a partisan time. It's so highly partisan, right? It's right or left, religious or not religious, vegan or carnivore. Everything's like tribal. And you have to almost be in a camp in order to gain a following and in order to just sustain the type of answers that you have. And when you ask and when I ask you questions, you're pragmatic. It seems like you answer realistically. You're just looking for a path forward. What is the best way forward versus I'm going to stick with the camp, with the tribe, whatever it is, if I'm left, right, and I don't care what the other side is. And I think that's why news is fading a little bit, because you have to get and this is why these platforms are amazing. You can speak for an hour or 2 hours. You can lay out your whole thing. You can have it back and forth. Versus on the news, you have to get like a 2-minute soundbite and then they edit.
I've been invited to news channels and I'm told, can you please tell us the biggest problem for wildlife in Africa? And I have 2 minutes.
Yeah. Ridiculous.
But the point you make about the similarities is very, very important for your audience and everyone else. Because a lot of people I meet, including friends in North America and Europe, they look down in Africa and they say, this is an African problem. And this is, I tell them, look at your backyard. In the US, that people don't believe in climate change for political reasons. There are people who are supporting, can't stand people are discussing energy sources and diesel and fossil energy. And, that discussion don't want to listen because that is where their butter comes from. But somehow the expectation is that the people don't understand why Africans can't understand why elephants are important. And somehow that they're just stupid not to understand that. Not forgetting that humans and leadership requires that. I meet some African leaders. They're not the bad guys. They're just faced with unemployment. In many of these countries, 30% unemployment. And then unless you are going to explain to this leader how many jobs elephants are going to create, before the next election, forget it. He's not going to waste a lot of time with you. He's going to waste a lot of time with a Chinese or an American who has to mine, some who has created a mining company somewhere that's going to employ people and pay. It's the system we live in. It's not, but a lot of people think that, oh no, how can they not understand this? No. How the challenge is not about them. The challenge is about us in the sector. How can we fail to make them understand? Mm-hmm. How can we fail as conservationists to make sure that even during this pandemic, honestly, how can we fail to tell people
you need celebrities
that conservation is a healthy?
You need African celebrities to go on social media. There was I forget the guy's name, but there was a Chinese basketball player, and he made an
he's been a big partner to us on iPhone.
So when he did an anti shark fin soup in China, that got a lot of traction. It made some young people change their mind, and you need something like that. You need celebrities. You need to go on social media and talk to younger people and make them understand.
Absolutely. We have a program now we call ambassadors, conservation ambassadors, that really targets those kind of influencers. And that's my point I was making, that we can't continue as we've been, only talking to conservationists. Have you been to a conservation forum? It's full of conservationists discussing the next new thing we are going to do. We are so used to talking among ourselves, which hasn't helped us. The people we need to talk to is not celebrity who has done something in conservation or found the next new species of frogs. No, it's someone who's playing soccer. It's a musician. It's the Minister of Finance. It's the central bank governor. It's the director of budgets. These are the people, the new heroes we need to get to conservation and explain to others why it's important. When I talk about it, I'm paid to do that. That's what people think. Mm-hmm. What would he say? He's a CEO of a conservation organization.
But you're passionate about it.
Look, for me, this is something I believe in. I didn't reach here because I was looking for a job. It's something I'm doing for my, I have two wonderful children and a wonderful wife. Their children and their future children. I completely believe that Africa cannot achieve our development aspirations unless we look back and take care of our natural resources. But also it's true economically that Africa's wealth is above the ground. We've been told by so many foreign economists how Africa is rich in minerals, how Africa is, and somehow our leaders, especially my generation, we think that the only way to develop is to look for riches underground, oil and other minerals. But our biggest wealth is above the ground that are competitive comparatively with our countries. You can find oil anywhere. It's a matter of technology. Oil is found everywhere else. It's a matter of technology that can find it. So are minerals. But what you can't find, I'm afraid, is a giraffe in its wildness that will never exist in North America. Or a tropical forest. It will never exist anywhere else. Or the longest river in the world. Or the wonderful river falls.
Which is why when I hear that potentially in 50 years, the only place you're going to be able to see, a wild, not a wild anymore, but a giraffe or an elephant or a tiger is going to be in a zoo, which is depressing as fuck. But that's a whole other, that's for another time. But let me just ask the second argument that I keep hearing. And I don't know if this is prevalent everywhere, but I know it's extremely prevalent here in the US. And I keep hearing this narrative and the same story over and over again. And that hunters are necessary for conservation. And when, let's say, hunters, forget here in the US that they hunt deer and wild boar, etc. But when they go to Africa, right, and then they kill an elephant or they kill a tiger or a lion, and they kill a giraffe or these magnificent animals that not many are left of them. And their argument is, oh, we pay the community, that meat feeds the community, and they get their little trophy, they get their picture. Forget like the ethical aspect of it, which I find appalling, but just on the merits of the argument, does that hold any water in your opinion?
Absolutely. I think that last year I was in Texas.
Okay.
And I learned that there would be nothing in Texas if it was not for the hunting community. And that's data. Wyoming and many of the states in the US that would have nothing if it was not for the hunting community there.
As far as
the ethics of the expansion of wildlife numbers outside national parks,
really,
on private estates, especially in Texas. Now, that is Texas, that's US. In Africa, we don't have a luxury right now at a point where we are to alleviate anything that can support and connect conservation to household aspirations. Maybe in the future we can have this discussion, but right now I know communities, that are conservationists because of hunting, and are supporting a lot of work on conservation because they're getting revenues from hunting industry. I know. So it's not about ethics. It's not about the reality of the matter is a country like Zimbabwe, for example, cannot, and we work in Zimbabwe, cannot maintain their buffer zones around national parks if it was not for hunting industry. That is a fact, because you cannot carry out photographic tourism in the buffer zones where there are shrubs. You can't even see wildlife. You can't even take any photo of anything. And when I say buffer areas, you're talking about square miles.
Yeah.
You really can't. In other countries where we are dealing, like Uganda, like here in Kenya, where we are dealing with the human-wildlife conflict, because people live literally next to a national park. There are no buffer zones.
Yeah.
So it's not about supporting hunting. I'm not a hunter. I've never killed anything apart from mosquitoes.
Yeah, they deserve it.
The fact, where I come from is that we need every toolbox, every tool in the toolbox.
Okay.
At the time when we are negotiating space for wildlife, we cannot alleviate anything, any tool which can be useful in one or another. However, the industry is not all good about the industry. In fact, I can even comfortably say a big part of the industry practices are bad. So when I say the industry contributes, it's fewer. It's where it's practiced well. And in many places, it's not. That is the problem that industry needs to sort out. When I talk about Texas, it's done better. Here, we need more regulations. We need more guidelines. We need to reduce corruption in that industry. We need to know who is licensed, who manages that, who benefits. Because there's that idea that, communities benefit, they take the meat. Who takes the meat? It's like the discussion we had around aid.
Yeah.
Who determines who takes the meat? Is it a big politician? Actually, communities have a meeting and decide, the women who manages food in many of rural Africa are the ones who decide who gets, or it's the men.
Well, it does. So, it sounds like it's not necessarily the So hunting necessarily does not benefit. It's not that the hunters, because it's always like, oh, we're crucial for these environments. I don't think they're crucial based on what you're saying. The income, the revenue is crucial. If they they say, oh, we love animals, we do this because we love wildlife and we love conservation. If they were truly loved wildlife, I usually don't kill the things I love, but just as a side note. But if they were to put that money into conservation without killing the animal, that would benefit just as much. It's not like the killing has any benefit. It's just this is another revenue stream that can help the community. And as far as
that's my point. Yeah. That's my point. There is no luxury where we are now dealing with a larger population, dealing with the people who are living below 30 cents a day. There are no emotions about these decisions.
Yeah.
We are, like I said, we need to meet people where they are. You cannot fight. That's why sometimes aid doesn't work. You cannot decide a response which doesn't solve a problem, which is a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, or to a wrong problem. So the idea is not stop hunting. Is what are the options you are providing to those who are benefiting from hunting? Yeah. Let's start from there. So it's not so, and that's not part of the discussion I'm hearing. A lot of these discussions, and that's why the African perspective is so important, because we've lived these things. We've lived these problems. The solutions, we need to be listened to in terms of the solutions. I've met people, demonstrators sometimes, around what's going on in Africa in terms of conservation. And until you realize that most of these people really, they're emotional about this. They are good people. They mean well. And they are talking from the heart. Less from the brain.
Yeah.
But from the heart. And that's important. So a lot of Africans, how do we get their hearts to connect to this problem? So this idea that we need to raise awareness, we need to educate more Africans. You don't get the heart, you get the brain. Mm-hmm. One conservationist made this observation. We were at a conference at Chatham House in the UK, and he made this observation that he made a statement that there are more elephants in London than in many African countries. And I looked at him and said, where are you going with this? Until he elaborated that tonight there are millions of kids in London that are going to bed with a stuffed elephant. Mm. And that's when you get their hearts.
Yeah.
That's when you get them giving money to an elephant. They will never see when they're adults. That's when they want it. But somehow we here in Africa, to get Africans to respond to conservation, we run workshops. Oh, catch them early. And we teach them conservation science. We get their brains. The effort is to get their hearts. You cannot negotiate conservation with a child who stopped to go to school because elephants raided their daddy's farm and ruined the annual income of that household. And this child was pulled out of school. And by the way, their grandmother died because they couldn't go to a hospital because a leopard came and ate the goats. That would have paid their health services.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Yeah. There's not one clear-cut answer in this.
Exactly. Even if you stopped hunting, you're not going to solve the problem. So my appeal is that energy going into that discussion of stopping the hunting or stop, stop poaching or using guns to do this, we could channel that effort in so many different ways and achieve the same objectives and goals.
Wow. All right. Well, on that note, we're going to finish for today. But this was a super, super interesting conversation. I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I think this is the first time my listeners heard this topic in such depth.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was a blast.
Let's do it again.
100%. Let's do it. Let's do it later in this year. Where's some of the best information for people to go online and find you, the organization, and get more information?
Oh yeah, please visit www.awf.org. www.awf.org. But please also follow me. I am on at AWF CEO, both on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook at AWF CEO.
I follow you on Twitter. So guys, go follow him. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kaddu. Bye.